Okay, so today we're going to talk about hearing. Can anyone tell me why hearing is important? Anyone want? We'll just shout it out. There's a hint on the screen. That's one of many answers. Hear music. What else? Communication. Yep, that's really what I was looking for. So I'm going to show you guys a video of these birds that I used to work with all the time called zebra finches. And you'll see that the male has orange cheek patches. He's on the left. And he's going to try his best with a female to see if they can maybe make a pair bond for life. These birds actually bond for life. So let's see if he's into it. Sad, right?
Garbage singer.
So basically, what a shame. So the female was listening to the male, and she decided, based on his song, based on just her hearing, that she was not super interested. She might have also been looking at his patterning in his coat. There might have been some visual cues, but for the most part, she didn't like the song. She was like, nope, that's not going to work for me. So, what?
It's something things do. It's not something you want.
It's not the most beautiful bird, I have to admit. So someone said communication, and that was kind of what I was getting at, that whether you're a zebra finch or a human, you need hearing because you need to be able to communicate with your conspecifics, the other people in your group. And here I'm showing you a picture of the birthday party effect, which is where if you're at a party, you're talking to someone, and you hear your name from across the room. Some of you guys might have heard this before. You suddenly are paying attention to that sound across the room, even if you weren't listening to that conversation before, you weren't eavesdropping or anything. So our brains are always interested in hearing in terms of what people are trying to communicate with us. And another one, question?
Do we like you're saying about our name, do we focus on things like that?
Yeah.
Audio cues, if we hear our name, we notice it more
Yes.
than something else. So
Definitely.
Eavesdropping is more like something that's spectator.
Yeah, it's actually subconscious. It's not eavesdropping at all. So I'll talk about that a little bit later, but the brain is actually helping us out. It's doing some work for us because I don't know if you guys noticed, but there's so many sounds that we have to tune out all the time, like the sound of the air system or like a candy wrapper or something. I always have trouble not focusing on those sounds though. And then one thing that I didn't hear you mention but is also important is sensing danger. So these are prairie dogs, and they actually have really sensitive hearing in the low frequency range, and when they're underground in their burrows, they actually can detect the footsteps of a predator from far away. And so they hear it, and then they communicate it to their other conspecifics with some sounds. So they're using hearing both to sense the danger and communicate the danger. So hearing is undeniably really important. So just to remind you guys, I'm sure you've seen this slide a bajillion times, but in sensory physiology, we start with the structure and we go to the function to understand how senses work. So in the case of sound, we have to understand that the stimulus is sound waves, and it's going to be transduced just like any other sense would be transduced through a receptor, through a pathway to the brain. So first, we need to understand what the stimulus is. Has anyone taken physics yet? Raise your hand. Nice. Do you want to describe what you think sound is? Do you want to take a stab at it? It's okay if not.
The vibration of the air.
Yeah.
Any medium.
That's perfect. So it's the vibration of the particles in any medium. For us, it's air, which we need to breathe, but we also actually rely on it to let sounds travel, like across the room, for example. So in the case of this violin, if you draw the bow across the violin, it makes the string vibrate. And that vibration actually causes a vibration in the air particles immediately surrounding the violin. And then over time, this causes the air particles to compress and expand in this kind of predictable way. That looks like this. So you can see there's these areas of compression and these areas of expansion. And this is the wave that ends up traveling to our ear. So that's sound waves, but we need to convert them into the language of the brain. And can anyone call out what the language of the brain is?
Electrical impulse.
Yeah, action potentials, electrical impulses. So we actually have a really long, strange road to get there, which is kind of a theme of sensory physiology. But first, I want to ask you guys a question to see if you're with me. So this might be an easy one, might not be. What can you hear in space? Start answering now. Two more people? One more person? Nice. Okay, I think that's all we got today. All right, so let's see what you said. Nice, D, nothing. Can anyone explain why the answer is nothing?
Space is a vacuum.
Yes, but there's no air, but there's also no particles whatsoever. So sound actually travels really well in water too. It's not that we need air to hear, but we need some kind of medium, and in sound, in space it's a vacuum, so you actually will not be able to hear anything at all. All right, excellent. So you guys are with me.
Wait, I have a question.
Yeah, please.
Doesn't it travel faster in different materials as well, like metal and stuff like that?
Yes, I actually don't know the specifics of that, but I think that the nature of the medium will change the way it travels, kind of like electricity. There are different conductors that are better and worse. Okay, so now we have to understand, we know the stimulus, we have to understand how the stimulus gets transduced. So our ears are actually doing a lot of work to help us transduce, and there's many strange steps, so please feel free to interrupt me with questions along the way. But basically, the outer ear, the ears that we can see, that actually has a special name. It's called the pinna. And the pinna is a funnel, and it's basically collecting all of the sounds in the room. It has no kind of predisposition or bias to one particular sound, and then it is funneling them into the ear. So sound waves travel through the pinna, down the ear canal, and to the eardrum. I damaged my eardrum this morning by using a Q-tip, and it was very painful. So treat your eardrums nicely. Has anyone ever heard of those ossicles before? It's a weird word. It just means little bones.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and there's 3 of them. The malleus and the stapes and one that I can't remember, but they all have their own names because they're so tiny, but they're so important for transduction. And basically, when a sound wave travels down the ear canal, it wiggles the eardrum back and forth, and the ossicles are attached to the eardrum. So they're doing this important job of taking sound energy and converting it into mechanical energy. Because when the ossicles move, they knock on the inner ear, and they're like, I hear something, hello. So here's just kind of a zoomed in picture of the way they move together to actually knock on the inner ear. And they're really tiny. This is them compared to a British penny, which I think is a similar size to an American penny. Unclear, but I'm pretty sure, yeah. Okay, so now I have a funny little demo for us, which is basically a model eardrum, and I will need a volunteer if anyone is willing to be the sound wave. Interested? Okay. So basically, I built this thing. And it's cool, and you can all build one at home. It's really easy if you ever want to like teach this to your little brother or sister or something. But you take a box, which is going to serve as the ear, and this paper towel tube is the ear canal. So sound waves get funneled in, and then this is just part of a balloon, and it's going to act like the eardrum. So we'll see what happens when we sing into the tube, if that's okay with you.
Oh.
No?
I think you got this.
I'm going to pour some grains of some salt on, and then we'll see actually. No, you just have to yell. Just be like, ah. Okay. So basically, you have to hold it up, and then we'll see how the grains of salt move. So you sing into there, and I'll hold it steady for you. Yeah.
Can't see it.
No one can see it.
Get
Okay.
shorter.
Is that okay?
Shorter.
Yeah.
No one told me that, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So you sing into the tube, and then you'll see that the grains of sand are going to move in a patterned way. Salt. Yeah, just
do something.
yeah. Say sensory physiology.
Okay. Sensory physiology.
Did you guys see that?
Whoa.
That was awesome. Thank you so much. You're a very brave volunteer. Woo! So basically, the grains of salt moved with the eardrum, this kind of balloon thing, And that's what happens every time a sound wave travels into our ear canal. It moves the eardrum, and then instead of grains of salt, we have the ossicles, which are going to move. And we've basically converted with this model ear sound energy into mechanical energy. Yeah?
I heard that the ear does something to amplify it like 30 times.
I don't know about that, but I wouldn't be surprised if, like, the way the funneling works with the help of the outer ear, that might help to amplify us.
I heard it was like with the bones. There
With
was
the
like
bones?
some mechanical advantage that they used because the ear, it wouldn't vibrate that much because it's so far in the ear.
Mm-hmm.
So like
So it also is serving to amplify? That's a good question. I can find out and let you guys know tomorrow. Okay.
It's actually maybe amplifying at the level of ion channel in the ear and also anatomical structure.
Really?
But bones and protection, yeah, this is their terms. The letters.
Yeah.
yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So, yeah, they're basically acting in this way to amplify, take small sounds and amplify them. Okay, so we're not there yet, right? We haven't actually made action potentials. We've just converted sound energy into mechanical energy. So we actually have way more to go, and it's going to get even weirder from here. So if you guys are paying attention, you may have noticed this weird curlicue-like structure, which is the inner ear. And there's a specific part of the inner ear, which is called the cochlea, this curled up part, and I think that is the Greek word for seashell. Kind of looks like a seashell, as you can see. So I'm going to tell you guys about what the cochlea does. It has a really important job, but it's kind of confusing to describe it when it's rolled up like this, so I'll show you an unrolled cross-section of the cochlea. Okay, so here is a cochlea, unrolled, and it's basically a fluid-filled sac. And inside the fluid-filled sac, there's this flat piece of flexible membrane called the basilar membrane. And what happens when a sound makes it through the ossicles, gets amplified, and kind of knocks on the inner ear, this is the last ossicle that's knocking on the inner ear, and it's actually disturbing the fluid in the cochlea. So when the fluid gets disturbed, the basilar membrane starts to wiggle really aggressively back and forth. And it's kind of making this wave that is converting the sound into this, or it's still mechanical energy, but it's kind of taking a different form now. So I have a really cool video that I think will help to explain this better, if you can see it. So here's the pinna, the outer ear. Sound is going to travel through the ear canal, wiggle the eardrum, and move the ossicles. And now we're going to unroll the cochlea. It's really strange looking, kind of looks like a tongue. And here's the basilar membrane on the inside. And now you guys are hopefully going to hear something. Oops, too loud. And you'll notice that low sounds happen at the far end and high-pitched sounds happen at the front. So actually your whole basilar membrane can be activated by Yeah, you're right. Remix. What song would you guys like to hear at this? Who knows? Do you have a question?
Oh yeah, so how does the body make it so it doesn't vibrate this way? It only vibrates in one direction, it doesn't turn
Go back and forth. I think that is a function of it being inside of the cochlea and being attached to this side of it. So it's attached on this side of the cochlea and it's not on this side, which means that when the fluid is moving, it's just kind of moving around. Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions about this? It's kind of strange. I've never heard about it before. Okay. So now I have another question for you, which is, are we there yet? Can we go to the brain, or do we have more steps to do? Okay, awesome. Oops. Yeah, so we actually are definitely not there yet. And the reason why is because we're not in the language of action potentials yet. That's a really important step that still needs to happen. But luckily for us, the basilar membrane is an expert at converting this mechanical energy into action potentials. So how is it actually doing that? Well, in the basilar membrane, there are these really weird cells. And you can actually only see the top part of the cells, the hairs, they're called, and the rest of the cell body is embedded in the basilar membrane. And so scientists, this is maybe a theme, we're not so creative with what we name things. So scientists said, let's call these hair cells. I know, predictable, right? Oops. Okay, so here's a cross-section of a hair cell. These are the hairs that you can see in this picture. And hair cells have a very important job. They're embedded in the basilar membrane, and when the basilar membrane is going like this in response to some like creepy organ music, for example, these hairs are actually getting yanked back and forth, and kind of like grasses swaying in the breeze. And if they get yanked in the right way, they actually open ion channels and cause the cell to become activated. So we actually generated an action potential. Cool, right? I know, it's so smart that the ear did it that way.
That is crazy.
I know. So I get very excited thinking about this, that basically mechanical energy is being converted into electrical energy based on this property, which is similar probably to the mechanotransduction that you talked about yesterday. So we made an action potential, that's awesome, and the basilar membrane is totally tiled in these hair cells. There are different types, but all you really need to know is that these hair cells are in the basilar membrane and they get activated by the movement, and then they connect to these cool spiral ganglion cells, which will then send information to the brain. So now we're on our way. We're done with transduction, but that was kind of a really involved process. Okay. Oh yeah, more action potentials. Love it. Okay. Oh yeah, and one more thing that I want to say about the cochlea is that it's tuned by species based on what's important to us. So we have a specific range. It's from 20 to 20,000 hertz. And the reasoning for that is because we use sound in specific ways, like to communicate with each other at short distances. But those prairie dogs that I mentioned before, like they have to have an even lower frequency hearing so that they can detect those predators from a long way away. So basically, by species, a cochlea is tuned to what's important to that species. Additionally, hearing loss can be a result of damage to the cochlea. So if you listen to your earbuds turned all the way up, for example, or if you go to a really loud concert, that can actually damage your cochlea and change the sensitivity. So you might not get those really high or the really low sounds. So be nice to your ears. And if you go to a concert, wear some earplugs. What? Okay. So I mentioned before, there are those prairie dogs that have really sensitive ears in the low frequency. Can anyone call out another animal that they think has really good hearing?
Bats.
Yep, bats for sure. Dogs also. So owls actually have really good hearing, and I imagine that's to hear their prey at night because they're nocturnal. Bats, as you said, and then also the prey that bats eat are these moths. And moths are like, okay, well, if you're going to catch me because you can hear so well, I'm going to develop even better hearing so I can actually hear the vocalizations that the bats make to escape. So these weird moths have the best hearing in the animal kingdom as far as anyone knows right now.
What's their hearing?
What their range, I don't know it, but I can find out. But it's extreme because bats, they use sonar, which is outside of our range by far. So these moths have compensated by having even better hearing than bats.
Dang.
Yeah, I know. Okay, and then I want to show you guys an example. This is actually, so our friend Jenny, the postdoc, she used to work with these cool fish called the midshipman fish. And they actually make audible vocalizations, which is unusual for fish, and you'll hear it. It's pretty weird. Oops, wait. Yeah, and they actually wake fishermen up in the night by making these sounds. Fishermen are like, what is happening? Yeah, so they make these sounds, and what's really cool about these fish, what I was talking before about the cochlea being tuned, only mature females that are ready to find a mate in like a male mate, only the mature ones can actually hear that range. So immature females that haven't gone through like fish puberty yet can't hear that. But if you give them the hormones that they need to go through fish puberty, they will be able to hear this. So there's actually a change that happens, which is really cool. So before I talked about the cochlea and about your possibly like losing your hearing as you get older, so I thought it would be fun to test our auditory age. Do you guys want to find out how old you are?
Yeah.
Not really.
No?
I want to be like 80 years old over here.
I can't hear a single thing.
You can't hear a single
So he's
thing.
80 years old over here.
Okay, so I'm going to navigate to this website, and it's not a very pleasant sound, so just prepare yourselves, and it's okay if you plug your ears. But I don't know, I've listened to it a few times and I've survived. So just what I want you to do is raise your hand when you can't hear it anymore, okay? Okay, I can't hear it anymore. Okay, so
Oh my god.
the ear age of a 13-year-old. So we all did pretty well. We all kind of tapped out at the end there. But some people, what?
This dude's
It's still happening. It's still ringing. So you guys might have heard, this may not even be an issue for you guys anymore, but when I was your age and even younger and texting was becoming kind of a thing and people were texting in class in like my middle school, there was a special ringtone that the teachers could not hear because it was outside of the range of what a 45-year-old person could hear. Yeah, so I never had it because I was a really good student and I was kind of a teacher's pet, but
class and teachers can still hear them, so.
yeah, I know. Yeah, don't even try it.
I want to try it now.
And don't try it on me because clearly I have really good hearing, so I'll know. Okay, so we tested our auditory ages. Yeah.
What in the ear makes it different with the older versus younger people and the higher?
Yeah, so basically this is a common theme among all senses that the receptors are not as strong when you get older. So specifically what happens with the cochlea is that hair cells at the really far ends like of the spectrum, so like really low and really high, they like older people have reduced sensitivity to at the level of the cochlea.
I think also some less hair cells, if I can add.
Yeah.
If you listen really loud music, you basically kill them, and this process is irreversible.
I have earplugs for everyone to take home, so don't be afraid to make use of them. Yeah.
How does the flat membrane thing, how does that stay flat when it's in a liquid and not being like tensed up?
That's a great question. I think that it has to do with the fact that it's in the fluid-filled sac and that it's rolled up in a specific way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And I think there's always enough pressure in there so that it's like it's not becoming unraveled, but it's always going to be sensitive to those fluctuations.
What happens if it like the membrane thing like pulls up and it's like folded?
If it folds, I
Yeah.
don't think that can happen. I don't know what the material is of the basilar membrane, but I don't think that you need to worry about that. I mean, maybe there's like, I don't know. But yeah, I wouldn't worry about that. Okay, so we've gotten the sound out of the ear and headed on the way to the brain. So I mentioned these spiral ganglion cells before that come out of the cochlea. And these are doing an important job of actually sending a projection to the spinal cord. Yeah?
Is there a possibility where they can have like inflammation in the cochlea and have like fluid that's not supposed to be in there? Like
Yes,
an
I think
infection?
so. I don't think that an ear infection always affects the inner ear, but maybe there is a case in which that can happen. I don't actually know, but I can find out. Yeah. So no, yeah, swimmers' ear, not fun. Okay, so the spiral ganglion cells are doing this important job of taking the action potential and sending it to the brain, but they actually have to do some work, some pre-processing before we even get to the brain, and that happens in the spinal cord, which is kind of another common theme about different senses, is that they meet in the spinal cord. to kind of compare and see what's happening. So what happens in the spinal cord is that you have two ears, right? And you're hearing the same things with your two ears. Hopefully most of us have two ears anyway. So the spinal cord is actually uniting the sounds that we get from these two ears. And there's these important phenomena that we're using, which is, they have fancy names, which are interaural time difference and interaural intensity difference. And what that means is that if I hear a sound over there, it's going to get to this ear before it gets to this ear. And it's also going to be louder in this ear than it is in this ear. Yeah?
Will your ears still work if you don't have this part? Or will it just like be quieter because it's not?
It's going to be quieter because the pinna is not funneling as well. So you notice that people will do this when they can't hear, and that's actually on purpose. You're like extending your pinna. You're making the funneling
It makes
better.
everything else louder, too.
Yeah. Especially what's close to you, you hear better. Yeah. So you have these two ears, and you're getting this time difference and also this intensity difference. And the spinal cord is putting the information from the two ears together to figure out where the sound is in space. So that's happening in the spinal cord. And then finally, we end up in the auditory cortex. And I don't know how much you guys talked about the cortex yesterday, but it's basically this area of the brain that's really powerful for processing, and it's also really organized. And the way the auditory cortex is organized is actually the same exact way that the cochlea is organized. So you can see that it goes from a low frequency all the way up to a high frequency. And that allows the auditory cortex to maintain all of the information that it got from the ear in an organized way. So it knows this is a low sound and this is a high sound. So that's what the brain gets. But what does the brain actually do with the sound, right? Because that's a really important part of like sensing, of hearing. Oh yeah, sorry. So basically, to review, the stimulus is
World.
what? The world for hearing.
Sound.
Yeah, the sound is the sound waves. The receptor are those weird cells that I mentioned earlier.
Hair cells.
And then it travels, so the hair cells are transducing. They go through the auditory nerve to the auditory cortex. But yeah, so we need to think about perception now. We've gotten all the way into the brain, but the brain is going to do some important stuff. Yeah?
Isn't there like a thing if you do use Q-tips, it like pushes your earwax back to your eardrum and like blocks it?
Yeah. Don't use Q-tips. As I said, I did it this morning and it was really painful. Find a different way to clean your ears. I don't know. Somebody needs to work on it. Yeah.
How do you get tinnitus?
Tinnitus is the ringing that happens in your ears. I don't know the answer. You're asking me all these tough medical questions. Do you guys know how tinnitus works?
I think inflammation can cause.
Yeah, I think it might be unnecessary movement inside of the cochlea that's causing the hair cells to fire when they're not supposed to. I think. But I'm going to double check that for you.
Liquid buildup can actually hold.
Liquid buildup.
Yeah.
In the outer ear?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
as a result, you can have extra activation of
Yeah.
receptors.
Yeah, so if there's liquid buildup in the the ear canal, it can actually move the eardrum when it's not supposed to be moving. So that's, yeah, I think that makes more sense
That's
than
why
what I was
doctors
saying.
will do drainage in your ear here. If you have,
They do what?
they can do drainage.
Oh, they drain it. Any other questions? Yeah.
How's earwax form?
I don't know the answer.
You asked a lot of questions, you know?
Do you want to teach the class?
Nah, we're working on senses here, not earwax.
I don't actually even know what the purpose of earwax is. It's probably to protect from bacteria or something. It is like, why earwax? I've
Sounds
never
about
thought about
right.
that before. Yeah.
It actually contains antibiotics.
Yeah.
Our body makes.
Yeah, to protect us from possibly getting
And then
tinnitus.
take it out.
Yeah, because we're humans and that's what we do. We mess with it. Okay, so we've made it all the way to the brain, but the brain now is going to do some important like post-processing for us. And I talked about the birthday party effect before, which is what I meant about this subconscious situation. I know. I know, we're gonna do the videos, but I'll just talk about a few things first, so stay with me. So we have the birthday party effect, which is where you're not paying attention, but your brain is actually kind of paying attention, and it's waiting for your name to be called basically all the time. It's kind of self-centered. And then when you hear your name, you like realize that you need to pay attention. So all brains do that. But there's also ways in which our brains can be better or worse at this. And a weird and cool way that a brain can be better at this is with the phenomenon of perfect pitch. Has anyone ever heard of that
Yeah.
before? Yeah.
What's that dude's name that had
Charlie.
Charlie Puth, yeah.
Oh, you guys saw some video on it?
This
Or
guy
David
is
Dobrik.
crazy. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. This dude is crazy. He can play like any song
Yeah.
by just like hearing like the first like chorus part.
Yeah.
He just gets it automatically.
He just knows it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so perfect pitch is a really cool ability that some people have, which when they hear a specific note, they can actually say, oh, that's an A, or oh, that's a C. And I used to play in my school orchestra, and I was always jealous of people who could do that, because like it's actually really hard if you play an instrument, you know, it's not easy to memorize what a specific note sounds like. So that's called perfect pitch. And then just the same way that there are visual illusions, there can actually be auditory illusions too, and that happens at the level of the brain when we trick the brain. So I'm going to play you guys this, which I'm sure you know and love, and we can see what we hear.
I was gonna ask you, but really just what you think about it.
So, and then I'll pull you guys
Laurel.
after, so just listen a few times.
Laurel, 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 laurel,
So some people will
Laurel.
hear Yanny and some people will hear
Laurel.
Laurel, and I'll explain why it's in
Laurel.
case you already know. But I want to see, I'm truly curious, so guys, can you vote if you heard Yanny or Laurel?
Okay, but the first one.
I didn't even like switch between them.
I heard Yanny the first time, but you had it on Yanny, and then I heard Laurel the second time. Unless I was reading it.
Answer
so I
choice
got
is
it.
A or B.
Oh, sorry, you can't see it. Let's say, I think that I said A for Yanny and B for Laurel. You can change your answer if you.
Laurel.
I'm just gonna put
Laurel. Just go back and forth. The first time.
Your
it was
clicker
on-
might be off. Mine was. All right, good enough. Okay, let's see what we got. Oh wow, an even split.
Yeah.
Cool. So that's actually great because some of these videos that say Yanny and Laurel, they don't actually work, and you can only hear one or the other. And so I was actually kind of worried until I tested it with Victor this morning. But I heard Laurel the whole time.
You're Yanny.
And
Victor.
So-
Am I something wrong with me?
Wait,
No, no,
does it-
no.
Wait, does it matter what we hear? Like, what's the science behind it?
So the science, I'm so glad you asked. The science behind it is that they're actually playing both over each other, and Yanny is high pitched and Laurel is low pitched. And so if you're more tuned to hear high pitched sounds, you hear Yanny, and if you're more tuned to hear low pitched sounds, you hear Laurel. So what?
I did hear it,
Laurel, like it's low key. Yeah, so this is actually, your brain is taking two sounds and it's actually choosing which one is more important. So if you heard Yanny, that means that your brain decided that a high pitched sound was more important.
Maybe it also means that you're old. That makes me sad.
No, I don't think it means that you're old.
That ain't right.
I'm old.
I don't think it means that you're old.
That was
No.
right.
Victor, you're young and fabulous.
She's right.
Okay. Okay, so that's one example where the brain is using auditory information and making a decision about it. But the brain is also, yeah, sorry.
So this one has the high pitch and low pitch, right? There's this other one where this little kid's yelling, and it sounds like dogs barking,
Oh.
dad's virgin, some weird stuff.
That
But
sounds
it's
very
really-
strange.
It's the same.
It's the
clip,
same
it's just
sound,
You
it's
have
just
to
like
read
think
it,
about
and then
it.
you can hear him say it. It sounds like 18
You
different
gotta
things.
look it up.
How does that
Oh,
thing work?
okay, we'll look it up. I'm clearly outdated.
is.
This is old news, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
Yanny and
Yeah.
Laurel, everyone's
This
over it.
one's so good.
Okay, I will check it
It's
out.
like 18 different
Well, thanks
things
for
on it.
suggestions. We may use it next
Yeah, I would love to
Yeah.
use it, but I'm sure there will be even a new one next year
It's kind of obnoxious,
because of
though.
memes. Okay, good to know.
Yeah, he's like screaming really loud.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So now I want to show you guys this other one, which basically the point of this is that the auditory cortex is talking to other cortices in the brain. It's the plural cortex. And so it actually is in close contact with the visual cortex, and it's going to kind of make things a little bit complicated sometimes, because I don't know if you noticed, but when you're hearing something, you're also probably looking at it. Those two senses are very closely related. Yeah, so this is actually probably based on this video that I'm going to show you, with this very strange, very serious video. There's like a whole introductory video that's happening, but I just want to play. You've seen it before?
I haven't seen this, but I've seen this guy before.
Yeah, this is
Kind of weirdo.
Always in YouTube?
He's a psychologist.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll just watch the video together. I think it's easier than me.
Ba, ba, ba.
Have a look at this. What do you hear?
Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba.
But look what happens when we change the picture.
Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba. Ba.
And yet, the sound hasn't changed. In every clip, you are only ever hearing ba with a B.
Ba, ba. Ba,
It's an illusion known as the McGurk effect.
ba,
Take another look.
ba.
Concentrate first on the right of the screen.
Ba,
Now to the left of the screen.
ba.
The illusion occurs because what you are seeing clashes with what you are hearing.
In the illusion, what we see overrides what we hear. So the mouth movements we see as we look at a face can actually influence what we believe we're hearing. If we close our eyes, we actually hear the sound as it is. If we open our eyes, we actually see how the mouth movements can influence what we're hearing. Ba,
All
ba.
right, that's enough of this man. But it's cool, right? So our visual processing is actually overriding our auditory processing, and it's making it a little bit confused. It's saying, I'm getting this really important visual information, and I think that you might be wrong, ears, because I'm seeing fa, so it must be fa. So that's another way that our brain can kind of get confused. So I mentioned before this idea of auditory localization, that we use both ears to figure out where a sound is in space. And also, as you see here, we use our eyes to figure out where a sound is in space. So now what I thought would be fun to finish up is to have you guys pair up into either groups of 2 or 3 and basically try to put your hearing to the test. So if you don't have vision, can you hear a sound? And what if you only have one ear? Can you figure out where that sound is in space?